What's the sentiment? The stigma men face. Hello and welcome to Sentimentsessions. I'm your host, Tyler, and today we have a real and raw conversation around the stigma that men face. I want to introduce my guest. I have with us Sterling Humphrey and Michael Miles, substance abuse counselor. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. And when we talk about stigma refers to negative thinking, connotation, beliefs about people and their character, whether that be LGBTQ, whether it be obesity, mental health. But we talk a lot about that in today's society, but we don't necessarily talk about the impact or the stigma that surrounds men in general. So I'm glad you're here today to talk to us about what men actually face in terms of challenges. Who wants to get started with just talking about some of the daily stigmas that you often see for yourself or what you see in general with men?
All right. What I basically see on a daily basis is the struggles that men have is with their identity, protecting that label, what's expected of them, So I challenge a lot of men with that on a daily basis. What does it really mean to be a man?
And when you say the things that they face, they're a challenge, can you give us some specific examples that you see or you encounter just in the counseling that you provide?
Being a good provider, being responsible, hard worker, sacrificing, committing, to protecting, what they represent, what a man is supposed to be. My challenge to them is that what you believe in? Is that what you want to do? Is it who you are? I challenge those guys all the time with identity. What is your real identity? Who are you? And they really struggle with that. They really struggle with what their true identity is, because most men feel like they can't be themselves. Because if they actually practice being themselves, then they can't really take ownership to that label of being a man, because it's not perceived of being a man to be emotional, to be less than, to not be able to provide or any of those things.
So do you think that a lot of men, is it, I guess, fair to say that a lot of men conform to societal pressure
Absolutely.
To become something to fit the norm as opposed to how they innately feel inside?
Absolutely.
So why do you think they succumb to the pressure? Is it because of fear of judgment?
Just fear, just lack of knowledge, I think. I don't even think it's fear. I think it's just lack of knowledge in general. I think the whole concept of what a man is supposed to be has taken its own course and its own path, so to speak, without question. Mm-hmm. This is how it is, this is the way it goes, and this is how it should be. And the reality is that in the shuffle of those things, I think men lose truly who they really are versus who they feel they need to be.
Okay, so just pulling it back for a second, when we think about how, society defines a man, you're a provider, you're a protector, you're a great dad, you're going out working every day, you're doing all these things so that you can show up and be that good, from the outside looking in. Oh, that's a great person. This is a great father. This is a great husband. This is a great worker. Is that pressure, or is it something else that I'm missing? Because I'm trying to figure out where is this is not me that men are feeling. In what ways are they feeling that they can't show up and be themselves? Is it that men don't want to do any of those things? I mean, I'm just asking a question that may come up in terms of.
I don't believe that they don't want to do any of those things. I think they just, once again, I think they don't understand the dynamics of those things they do till much, much later on in life. Because I'm seeing that, you know, if you look at it that way, it's a value system, right? It's the things that they've been told they should value, right? But what's left out of that equation is do they value everybody else but themselves? It's kind of like saying to someone asking you to do something and you clearly saying to yourself within yourself, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that, and then you turn around and say, okay, and you go and do it, right? What I've come to understand as an individual of my own self is this. Once I came to the realization that a lot of times I went against everything that I felt, I believe I lost a part of who I really was. And at some point.
So expound on that when you say you lost a part of who you really are.
Because I went against my natural feelings. I went against how I really felt.
To peer pressure and gave in to something that you didn't want to do.
I believed it was expected of me to do that.
Gotcha.
I didn't see it as pressure. I just think that I was led to believe these are the things that men do.
Gotcha. Based on what you were taught.
Yes.
So I'm coming back to that, but Sterling, I want to kind of get your insights into what you encountered daily or have, you know, in the past to where you felt maybe you had to succumb to some societal pressures to fit the norm or the standard of what the world is telling you how men should be, you know, a man should be or act.
Well, it's a different type of pressure for us younger black men because we grow older in an environment where you have to worry about your own brother in the neighborhood trying to kill you from having just that identity of who self is, that inner strength. You know, you can be that person who loves self, and you can have someone in the neighborhood who, you know, it's a young black man that get killed all the time just because they outperform on the basketball team, the football team. You got young guys that's going to school ready to shoot up the whole football team. It's a different type of pressure that's going on out here that younger black men is dealing with that the older brothers have to deal with. You know, we killing each other out here on a totally different level. That's just one of the major things.
So, right, and I think when minds are being shaped, when paradigms are being formed and norms are being established, it's based on a survival mentality, what I'm hearing what you're saying. If you're growing up and now having to watch your back and you operating in that mindset, that can create a certain norm for you, right?
Well,
or
it's about the have and have nots. Mm-hmm. After you create that position where you can provide, you know, it's black collar work that's being done out here by us younger black men. We're learning how to hustle in different types of ways. Mm-hmm. So we're learning how to make money very efficient. And some people may not be able to think that fast, but also depending on what type of surrounding you may have had people who gave you gratitude, or you may have had people who tried to turn on you or do things behind your back to take what you have built. Happens every day, happens all the time. So it's a mentality that comes along with who can I really trust? And that right there becomes a stress every single day just going outside, you know. You got your loved ones and stuff like that. You got people who you know ain't go harm you, but you got to be selective on who you allow into your paradigm, your group, because you let the wrong person in who don't eat as good. You let the person in who haven't been used to that type of gratitude. They've been used to people. It feels so good that they kind of reject the love, you know. And that right there is a struggle. Some of the things that I face as being in a city that I love, but seeing how you got different areas that operate differently, north, side,
exactly, south. And that's a great point with respect to, you know, the type of conditions you're brought up in, right? In society, you all have two different varying perspectives on, and some commonalities with respect to upbringing and things of that nature, that has shaped those paradigms that you now start to question, right? Then you're starting to challenge, but they probably are totally opposite from someone else who may have raised in a different area that don't have to necessarily live in the survival type of
We all face
situation.
different struggles that creates a mentality of survival. Then the food that we eat make us think a certain type of way as well. So it's like,
And I'm gonna get to the food subject, so hold that thought. But I want to come back to just in terms of the stigma.
What I like what he's saying is the mentality that he's talking about, but it also goes back to the very beginning of the mentality when I talk about the stigma of being a man. See, part of the
you gotta have a man show you how to be a man for you to know what the steps is. If a man wasn't there to show you, and you was raised by your mom, which a lot of us younger black brothers was raised by our mom. That's why you see a lot of brothers out here with the twisties and the dreadlocks and stuff like that, because they was raised by their mom, and their mom had to have that mentality of a woman and a man. So that young man had to get an insight from football coaches or uncles or cousins. That father was in the household to show him how to communicate with that woman properly or be a man.
Exactly, but that's just one type, right?
Right, but I was raised by a woman, right? But my mother didn't actually show me how to be a man. I think the stigma of being a man was more prevalent than my mother showing me how to be a man. Like that attitude that you said, the conditioning of not trusting anybody and all of that, I think that was ingrained in me because I was led to believe that men don't ask for help. Men need to figure it out. You need to work it out. It's less than a man to ask for help. If I asked for help, it signified that I was weak or not good enough. Right? So I get what you're saying with that, but I didn't get any of that mentality of that from my mother. And I was raised by my mother, you know what I'm saying? But never once did I feel the manly part of that. Matter of fact, now that we're talking about that, I became the man because I didn't have that. My mother didn't have that man figure. So I grew up, I wasn't allowed to be a young man. I had to grow up and be the man. So whatever concepts I got from most of it probably came from TV, Westerns and all that type of army pictures or something like that. But I didn't have a male figure in my life that showed me how to be a man. What it showed me was that I had to take the hit. I had to be the sacrifice. And that's the attitude and mentality that I took on.
And that's a great point, because a lot of what men learned was through what they saw other men do,
Sure.
right? Whether that was right or wrong based on what someone's perspectives or views, or what they watched on TV programming, and like you said, Westerns and military movies and action movies, even superhero movies.
All loners. Yeah. The loners were the hero.
Exactly.
They didn't have an army. They were loners.
Exactly.
But it's a difference at the same time, because I got some brothers who have their father who can give them the proper motivation and the proper guidance on how to be a productive man, and they don't. Some of them don't listen. Then you got the brothers who never met their father, and they be everything for their children, and they being everything for their wife, and it's like you see the different type of motivation sometimes, I guess, behind just the person who's producing whatever energy they're putting out, whether it's a gratifying energy or if it's one of them type of energies where some people would say negative things to try to push you to be a better person, you know what I mean? And that right there can be killing a person on the inside, but they still utilize it to become that better version of themselves. And then you learn, like I said, you start to learn the gratitude that comes along from an actual a sympathy, a mother that has sympathy compared to a mother that gives out tough love. A father that has sympathy for his children compared to a father that gives out tough love, and it makes the children grow older and disperse a certain type of energy. That right there creates a whole nother paradigm that we don't even know takes place because.
Well, I guess the point I'm thinking of is, given that there's a lot, of course, stigma that the men face. A couple of questions come to mind. Is this predominantly across the board with all men, or I know that Black men, you all have your own stigmas that you face and challenges.
Just with us Black men.
So
we
just
can't
with
speak for no other race but us Black men.
Well, a lot of times, I have female friends, white and Black, and I know we have commonalities, right? We have some threads that tie us together that we as women face. What I'm trying to get to is, based on the counseling that you provide, I'm sure from a diverse perspective, you see it across different cultures or races.
The thing is, the stigma of being a man it has nothing to do with race. It's a condition that all men have been groomed to. And I'll give you an example. First of all, no man is allowed to show any emotions. That's across the board. Every man believes that men don't cry. That's just a myth.
Now, who came up with that?
Well, that's part of the stigma of what a man is supposed to be.
Right.
The reality is men do cry. Why? Men have to ask themselves, why don't they cry?
Right.
You clearly know that you do, but you force yourself not to.
You want to know?
Something's very sick about that.
I wanted to
Because
bring
it's tapping into the feminine energy side
not
of it?
necessarily tapping to the feminine energy. Well, it may be because I was once an individual who was shedding tears in my first pickup truck because I tried to do this thing my way, and then you start to notice that once you get pulled from a certain type of energy, which is a spiritual energy, and you know that we were conditioned to believe in Jesus Christ, that pulls away from that wholeness mentality that comes along with trying to do it your way. And then once you kind of like give your faith to a certain, whether you're going to be a Hebrew Israelite or you're going to be a Moor, or you're going to be a Hotep brother, or you're going to be a 5%er, you're going to be a Masonry, you got the Muslims. It's different copes out here that will help you strengthen to be that conditioned type of man in that organization. So I had to kind of make a certain decision on where I wanted my faith to be, so I wouldn't feel like all the weight was on my shoulders, because every single day it's a war with self on you got to stand upright, and you got to go out there and be that provider. The income may not be enough, but then you got to, figure out different hustles. Okay, you still got to keep yourself strong. You still got to walk yourself upright. Okay, still got to keep yourself strong for the children, because you got to give off good energy for them, and you got to be strong for your woman. There's nothing wrong with being that strong man. It's just when you have to consistently go through the process of really just seeing that other people have a hard time going through it, and everybody's getting pulled in different faith with different belief systems. Some people, it's a different type of man out here that's calling himself God body. They look at themselves as being God now.
So is it, again, I'm just trying to get to, is it a weakness to cry, to feel? I mean, even Jesus wept.
It's not a weakness.
I'm just like,
it's not a weakness. It's actually, you got some people who cry for like after my accident, I had happy tears that kind of came out. Before my accident, it's only probably three good times I probably didn't shed tears throughout my years, and one reason was because I wanted to say some very mean things to my mother, but I love her so much that I couldn't say it.
Out of respect, obviously. But so three times in your adulthood that you've cried.
Yeah, it's about three.
So is that considered to be normal? Is that considered to be average? And I guess you deal with this all the time in the counseling,
Well,
right? Do men?
the reality is this: everything has a purpose, and crying has a purpose. So if you look at it this way, if you know that crying has a purpose and you've deprived yourself from doing it, then obviously something is going to affect something because it's natural to cry.
Well, and that's
So that's kind of where that falls into that arena is what is the purpose of crying? Well, most people like to say, crying is a cleansing. Okay, let's just say crying is a cleansing. If you don't cry, then how clean are you?
well,
I'm just curious.
You can also channel the energy and learn how to practice the attributes in a different way and work out to release that in a different form. It don't always have to be so
Interior.
sentiment, but sometimes it will get to that point where you take in so much. We like sponges.
It's like
We like a sponge.
a
You take
lid
in-
on the pot that's boiling, right?
But it's. I understand that clearly. I understand exactly what you're saying. But see, the illusion is this, and what's being said right now. See, we've been conditioned to believe that you can either control your feelings and emotions or fix them. What I've come to the reality is this: feelings and emotions were never designed to be controlled or fixed.
Correct.
They was designed to be managed. And the only way you can manage your feelings and emotions is first you need to identify what your ass is feeling. And most of the time, most people don't even know what they feel. All they know is they don't like the way that they feel and they look for ways to fix it. May it be through drugs and alcohol, may it be sleeping with another woman, may it be, busting a window, I don't know. But they come up with solutions because they just want to feel better.
They want to release.
That's
they
it.
want to get it
so
off.
that's
right?
kind of what you were saying is about there's other avenues to versus crying. You're absolutely right. But the reality for me is I've come to accept feelings and emotions were never designed to be controlled or fixed.
No, you're right. They supposed to be just
designed
managed.
to be managed.
It talks about it in the Bible. It's different.
I believe that no one was ever taught those things. We were led to believe they could be controlled or fixed. But I don't believe, if anybody should have had a life skills class, that's what life skills should have been on. It should have been teaching us how to deal with our feelings and emotions and how to manage those things instead of building birdhouses and cooking cookies and all that old kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying?
That's the beauty of it, though. Because from household to household, it's going to be different.
And that's a good point you just said. It's going to look different. So is there a such thing as a norm? Is it what's normal for you? Even if that's a strong deviation from what societal norms tell us?
I don't like the word normal.
Right, because there's no such thing. I mean, we got like the average of what we see, but everybody's practicing the average, but not necessarily telling their truth about how they feel about it, right? So what is considered normal? Do we really understand what normal is?
We don't.
So
because we shape the world with our mouths for once. We create a world and the imagination of what we think the world and how it's supposed to be. And then we force that onto other people. Whether we learned it from someone who taught us or whether we was able to go through a certain experience to help others see it from a different perspective, so that's what takes place. You got everybody that's gonna cook their greens differently. And that right there, everybody greens gonna taste differently. So like there is no normal.
it's what's right for you.
It's what's right for you.
But how do we, if everybody does what's right for them, and there's contrast, like there's some conflicts in there, right? How do we now work together to ensure that
it becomes an organization where, like a tribe, it becomes a person starts something, then a tribe, it grows into like a tribe.
So you have to find your own norm. You have to find your tribe.
You have to find the people who kind of think
like you,
how you think.
Even if that means it's not necessarily accepted by the mass. the masses,
Well,
right?
I understand that. I understand that whole concept, but my thing is this: I'm a little more basic in in the natural order of things. That's why I don't even like the word normal. I like the word natural. Normal. It clearly we know there is no such thing, so why use it? See,
Right.
I'm not even. I'm not buying all those things anymore. But when you say it takes, when you say we all have to come into our own, a reality for me is this: we are all human beings. I believe naturally we already have what it takes. I think we just have not been practicing being human beings. I think we've been taken away from the basics of who we really are and trying to be defined to be something that we're not. And if we can return back to just simply the basis of acting and treating people accordingly and acting like human beings, then the village is already in existence. I don't think we have to create it. I think it's naturally there. I just think we've been driven and taken so far away from it that we can't see it.
So,
And I believe when we become, and I'm just using this, and this is just my perception of what things look like for me as an individual. I practice being a human being every day. And I find myself at a lot of times on my island all alone because I'm not fitting in with everybody else. Because they look at me and say, what is wrong with me? Because I'm not leading and feeling to the status quo, or I'm not going along with the protocol or following everybody else's footsteps. But I'm just treating people how I want to be treated. And I'm also treating people how I love myself first.
exactly.
Because what I have defined is this, absolutely, positively, for sure. You cannot give something that you don't have.
Exactly.
You can say you're a good daddy, you can say you're a good father, you can say you can say all that one. You can say that you love your parents, your family, you can say all that. The reality is this: if you're not loving yourself, you can't
there you go.
give love.
I say
it's
that.
just a damn good idea or something that you want. I've learned I love myself unconditionally, which has allowed me to love other people unconditionally.
And talk to me about what unconditional love for self looks like. Is it
How
total
I treat
acceptance
myself, self-acceptance.
So talk about what some of the things you've overcome to get to this. So if you don't mind just being vulnerable, like giving a specific example of like a stigma you had for self that you overcame to now it's like I accept self.
The stigma, the only real stigma I can honestly tell anybody that I really have, and I have to be real specific about it. When you start talking about a spiritual place for me, the only stigma I believe for so long, everything was about me.
Oh.
That's the only stigma I ever really had. The reality is this: once I came into the realization that ain't none of this ever been about me, I overcame all stigmas.
Wow.
And now I understand who I am, what I am, and why.
Okay.
And it's bigger than just you, it's bigger than just me.
You follow me?
Exactly.
So when somebody says, who are you? My name is Michael Miles. I might be a father, a son, or all those things. The reality is who I really am. I am a human being, and no one can change my label of being a human being.
I love that because we live in a society where we're always trying to define ourselves based on what we do for a living, what we passionate about, whether it be in a relationship, but who are we? that's a question I think that we need to consistently ask ourselves on a daily basis, because we're forever evolving as humans. I mean, who I was last year, I'm not even
Yes, exactly.
today, right? Like,
The frequency.
yeah,
The
and I've
frequency
learned
changes.
more, and I know that it's about what you know that allows us to
Sure.
continue to, evolve, if you will. And I remember being younger and hearing on Channel 9, I think it was a PBS, well, like, the more you know, the more you grow. And, it was like, what does that mean? But, as I'm getting older, the more I
Right.
realize things, helps me to challenge those paradigms and understand it, I'm not who I think I am. I'm more than that, but I'm on this quest and journey. So is
Sure.
this what you're saying? And this doesn't go just for men, it does for women too.
Sure.
But a lot of women, we look to get the support from our men to, shape that vision as well.
Yeah.
Is it a man, and I got to bring us in here a little bit just to give the female viewers a little bit of understanding of
Good.
what it is that you all are thinking about when it comes to relationships, like in the role you all play, in the pressures that, we have an alarming, high rate of divorces that are happening. We have this whole new era of narcissism and, this like movement that's happening here.
Well,
Like,
it all goes back to the defining line. The defining line is the expectations of what a man is supposed to be. And I think when it comes to women or whatever, they've been hoodwinked, bamboozled too.
So what does an ideal relationship look like then?
you know.
If it's not the one that we've been sold on, this
ideal
And that could be
relationship looks like
the big question.
because I promise you, I've been horrible at it.
Yeah.
It ain't working, so what am I missing?
That could be
Is
the
it
big
because of
question.
the paradigms that
I really believe that.
So what does it look like, whatever it looks like for that person, going back to what you were saying, Sterling,
Some
about
people seek out a certain type of energy. If they was raised in a household where dad put the foot down,
Right.
listen what dad said.
Right.
they're going to
That's how
look
they
for
was
that
raised.
in
I had a southern
Absolutely.
I had a southern girlfriend before, and she was like different from any first girl to iron my shirt, actually. And she was just raised differently because her parents raised her a certain way, and it gave me an insight on being selective on the type of women I have been attracted to. And, we all kind of seek out, we have like, for a minute ago, women was talking about the love language and stuff, and us brothers was like, love language, we trying to figure out the different love languages and stuff like that. So like everybody just really kind of starting to understand what self is really interested in, and you'll treat that person a certain type of way, and if it's good, that person gonna treat you back a certain type of way, and you'll communicate and comprehend and be sentiment towards each other's emotions.
But how do you get there, especially in a society where most men
Growth.
are with the stigma, right? They have this thought that this is how men should think, this is how men should behave,
Just slowing the conversation down and being able to be careful of the vibrations that we send out with the word that we use. Sometimes it's not best to really say some things. Sometimes it's best to allow a person to talk. It's like raising a child in a way. If you don't give that child a chance to voice their opinion, it's going to become suppressed. And once it becomes suppressed, then you have energy on the inside that you got to get out some type of way. And you can say it and your voice can be heard, or it may not be heard. That's one thing that we as men have to struggle with every single day. We may say something to our woman and we want our woman to respond a certain type of way, but not give us too much back, because we already got our mental that we trying to keep keep everything lined up. So we don't really like the back talk for real. If it's playful, it's cool, but if it
I mean,
becomes.
that's a different, I find that to be different amongst men. Some men, like you said, goes back to your upbringing. Some men can handle that. Some men don't, Some men like strong women, other men don't. But,
What I do hear you saying is what is those expectations of men in a relationship? But that whole mentality in general, as a whole, people are still searching for shit on the outside of them to make them whole.
Yes.
So when you're looking for a mate or whatever, you're looking for somebody that's gonna make you whole and complete.
Exactly.
And the reality is, we don't need outside entities to make us whole and complete.
Exactly.
Anything on the outside of us is a bonus. That's a plus.
Exactly.
You follow me? So to have that whole and completeness, it has to come from within. Then you won't have all those expectations on the man and what what he should be owning up to, because you have that self-reliance, confidence, and comfort of being in your own skin.
And it goes back to what Sterling was saying as far as a frequency and attraction. You're going to attract that person that's operating on that level with you because now you're whole.
Exactly.
I have a girlfriend who's big in statistics and math, and she goes, when it comes to getting in a relationship, a whole number can't get with a fraction of a person. A whole number multiplied by a fraction, it becomes a fraction. That was deep for me. I was like, oh, that whole now has reduced itself.
Yeah.
And when you get two whole numbers together, you produce whole.
Absolutely.
So we talk about it on the spiritual level of just really looking within and finding that, self, finding your inner being and tapping into your spirit to be reliant. A lot of people do look externally. Myself, I have spent a lifetime looking for external validation, right? Specifically from men, because you want women. We live in a society where we've been taught everything is based on our outward appearance.
Absolutely.
So how do we be desirable? How do we, when I was growing up, it was like we wanted to be in the videos. We wanted to be, we wanted to just go to concerts and just like, let's dress up, let's look cute. It's all about the outward, less about what you think. What do you look like?
Right.
And not everybody is blessed with great looks,
No doubt.
And so what happens with that? So, but that goes back to now we is allowing the men to select, define, and if that man isn't whole, it could screw up a generation of women, especially if you have a lot of broken men that have been hoodwinked, right? To think that toxic masculinity. And I want to talk a little bit about this too. That toxic masculinity is now gives them the pass to now to judge others and tell who, whether it be women, children, or friends, that this is what it is. They, growing up, they were looking at rappers and, the people that were idols, they idolized, whether it be drug dealers or what have you. Oh, that's the man. And then they wanted to mirror that. And that was just creating generation after generation of just a different chaos. So what talk to me about the toxic masculinity. How is that shaped?
Before I go there, I want to just backtrack a little bit on what you were saying about, being in these relationships and making you whole. This is where that whole value system comes in that I'm always talking about. The exterior stuff is the things that we value. That's a value. We've all been groomed to value the outside and not the inside. And when I say value the inside, I'm saying value self. You said it best. Everybody don't look good, right? But nobody can see nobody's inside.
Correct.
Right? Because I done seen some very beautiful people that's completely ugly.
By society standards.
No. they ugly. Their attitudes, their personalities, as beautiful as they are ugly. And I've seen some of the ugliest people be some of the most beautifulest people because of their inside.
Wow.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Exactly.
You can look good on the outside, but it doesn't make you
right.
a beautiful person. You see?
So is that because Sterling, I heard you talk a little bit about that too, about the energy, being attracted to that person's energy. That inside is where you see that beauty, where you see, that this person has
the value.
Yeah, the value.
They
right?
value themselves, in spite of how they look.
Yeah,
they find their own self.
Frequency.
And so I'm assuming that's attractive,
Some
right?
people call it unequally yoked. Some people call it being on the same frequency. People got their own terminology for it. Me personally, I look at it like, okay, a person energy is going to tell you everything you need to know about them. How they talk to you, what type of respect they got for you. The tone of voice that they use. Of course, us men, we have our way of deepening our voice and saying things very firm. And verbal is one way, but once you do witness or you see or hear about people who have the domestic relationships and stuff like that, you gotta be mindful that it's people out here that's getting bamboozled into thinking that a person has a good heart, but they really just intentionally just using that energy or that person just to try to get themselves in a higher position. And it's men and women that's doing this.
Absolutely,
So,
it definitely works on both sides.
So you got people being used out here to try to get into that position where they can live comfortable, so they can live, so they can be able to have
that American dream.
That American dream.
So there's a desire to live it, just a manipulative way of trying to get there.
I mean, you got men and women doing it.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
but we talking about men now, so. It was like this on y'all right now. We ain't coming over here. But, it goes back to, would you say the pressure to try to get there has been, I'm just trying to figure out why there's so many manipulative men. It's just my opinion based on my conversations with women. It's a lot of manipulation. Is that
I'm back. I'm with him now. I think
it's on a reverse psychology thing.
Both ways. I think I'm with him. I think the
women,
in
defense of women, it always has been the man that findeth the wife, right? So
I don't know.
So what?
It's I have met people. I used to do security, so I used to meet people and just sit back and talk, and you get to hear about the different scenarios. And some situations are very weird. You do have some women out here putting rings on the man finger, and they bossing the men around, and that's just
they operating in that masculine energy, right? They stepping. Is that what we've been taught, or is that what we should be doing, right? Or
what's supposed to go on is the communication that takes place when a woman if she's raising a young man and she want this young man to grow older and be respectful to women, she have to be mindful how she communicate with this young man and how she discipline this young man so he can grow older and have the respect on just knowing that this woman is not going to always just try to take him to that boiling level.
I think it's also because we do live in a society, not to cut you off because I'll let you get back to it. We do live in a society where we do have more female single parent household with women or raising men. So I do think that when we talk about this stigma, and myself included, as I raised a son, right? There's a lot that I didn't know. There's a lot. So we do have to understand what those things are that a man is facing so we can
This is what warrants the conversation to be had right now, just what you just said. I don't know if anybody's paying any attention, but the reality for me is this. Men are being extinct, period. They don't, and it's the mentality of men that's killing them, not the other thing. It's their whole perception of trying to maintain the gun line, I call it, of being a man, and it's costing them their life. right? That's all to it, because they don't know how to break the cycle. They locked into the cycle of what a man is supposed to be. And, you talk about the masculinity. It's 3 guys over there ready to jump on you. And this is the perception that men have. It can be 3 guys over there ready to jump you. You clearly know that you're not going to win this fight. But because of your label of being a man, you're going to go over there and get your ass whooped. His brain don't tell him to run. His brain tells him to run to it. You follow me? Now, any man in his right mind, it's 3 of them. Run, let's fight another day. But that's not how we click. As soon as we've challenged that masculinity that you're talking about, it's going to rear up first. Now, the second thought might, well, this might not be a good idea.
Right.
But you're going to have another man sitting on the other side of you saying, hey, dude, go get him.
Right.
And as soon as he say, go get him, you're going to run over there and go get him. You're going to come back with your head half knocked off. And the guy sitting over here next to you going to say, you the man. That's what that looks like. And that's kind of the perception that men have.
But that also plays out into how that man now shows up in all of his
relationships
and
well.
Everything, right? Because I think that tough guy attitude plays into, you know what I'm saying? It's not a good.
I want to throw this in there just for a buffer.
Okay.
I slept with my grandfather. He lived with us. He was an alcoholic. And he had 8, 9 kids, right? And his wife, because he's alcoholic, she was separated from him, but she always took care of him. He always lived with one of the kids or whatever. And she was a very strong, healthy woman. But he never really talked until he got drunk. And the whole time he would be calling my grandmother's name in his sleep, calling her name, Doree. And I used to be up at night listening to him like, this dude tripping. I followed him one day, and he's, back in the day, they used to sit on the corners and drink whiskey out them little half pints. But one day I slid up on my grandfather, and he was out there with his buddies or whatever. And I was young, man, when I heard this conversation. Every single man that was in that circle with that bottle had a conversation about a woman that he never could own up to be the man that she needed to be. He was totally in love with her, and he never recovered from it. I learned a very valuable lesson in that. It showed me right there pride and ego in men. As much as they loved those women, they couldn't bring themselves to even submit to that?
And what is that? What is that? Because that plays out even today. A man will love a woman, but because of how he's been trained up, he won't even.
It's the gun line.
And we call him a weak man. We'll call him now he has to live with
reverse psychology that comes in place, and we allow women to stick with that reverse psychology, and we find royalty from a woman that gives us royalty.
Or you get a good woman and don't know how to treat her. Some men do learn, I know better.
Right.
I got a good one over here.
Yeah.
I better not mess this up. But they'll go on a self-sabotage because they either don't believe it's real or they just don't want to challenge the fact that I need to work on me. I need some help. I realize that this is a good thing, but I also know that I got some work I need to do on self. I don't know. Is it possible for men to even shift that paradigm?
Well, I think it's possible.
It's always possible.
I think it's possible, just like we sitting here having this conversation now. The problem is nobody's having the conversation.
Nobody's talking about
Nobody's
this.
talking about it.
Everybody
Nobody-
pointing the finger, but
You
nobody's
see,
talking about it.
and when it comes to men issues, women have
We do.
major support systems. Men don't have. This is a conversation. You know how
And why
hard it
is
is for it to
that?
have?
Because men are afraid to
again, have
show
been
vulnerability.
shown we're supposed to figure it out, work it out, not ask for help, know everything. You understand? And anytime you show anything less than that, it changes your label. And nobody wants to change their label. You ask them, if you ask a man for help, you can be pouring your heart out to him. He'll say to you, man the fuck up. The only reason he tell you to man the fuck up is because he really don't know what else to tell your ass. If he had any other real advice for you, he'd probably give it to you.
Yeah.
The reality is, that's all he knows is to tell you, man the fuck up.
So what is the fear with the vulnerability? Is it a perception that, in addition to being, I'm not saying this is what I feel, but this is what I've heard, right? That this is a weakness, is showing femininity, or is it a fear that, are you considered, and we're living in a society where LGBTQ, right, is way more acceptable in our society than it was when I was growing up. It was a fear that men are tapping into something that they might perceive as their, you know what I mean? That they might be gay. I hear a lot of this, so I'm just gonna just ask the tough questions. Like, why is it a fear that a man is gay if he shows vulnerability?
Because they've been led to believe that.
But is it true?
No, it's
Because
not
men
true,
can
but it's
show
led
vulnerability
it's kind
and
of
still-
like this, man. We on the playing field, right? We out there young in the school or whatever. If a guy doesn't show toughness, they call him a gay or a fag.
But
Or
see,
something,
that's where it goes to. That's why I
yeah.
say men struggle with the power of manipulation, the frequency that's pressed on them. That right there is what's taking place in society every single day. And you got some people who's going to be strong enough to remain solid, which is my first chapter, remain true to who you are. A lot of people, my books talks about the power of manipulation. If a child grows older, a child comes into this world, right? That child, you can see clearly if the child has either a female or a male, right? The child hears the frequencies around it and puts and it takes in what it hears. So you have people out here who have created their comfortability way of living that's suppressing these ways of living onto people and children out here. The power of manipulation is what's causing us black men to become even more suppressed because we have already, the school system does it best. We got to learn about us losing a war. Come on now. So it's like, it becomes a situation where I try to stay away from what certain organizations have to say because, like I say, everybody cook their greens differently.
So along those same veins in terms of toxic masculinity and the perception of vulnerability and weakness, I want to just touch on a subject that's really kind of near and dear to my heart that I've kind of followed over the years and that's men in prison systems. I know this could be a whole nother podcast, which we might have to consider. But, in the society, especially in the black community, where an alarming number of men, black men specifically, are locked up or have been institutionalized and have went through the system, right? And trying to come back out into society, from, maybe they were in juvenile all the way up through adulthood, but coming back into trying to just perform those societal norms, or even those that are still behind bars and just trying to understand why am I here? How did I get here? Or what can I be doing different? Or preparing to come out and convert back into society. What are your thoughts around some of those challenges? I know that you see that in your practice, you've experienced, friends or close family, and then you see that and you've done with your nonprofit at one point to try to convert or help men transition. What are your thoughts around the stigma that they face?
Well, I work with Bureau of Prisons, federal inmate reentry program for over 12 years, and a lot of those guys were incarcerated at a young age. And most of them done 10 to 15 years. Most of the guys that I work with, none of them had any short stays. It was 10 years or better. And let's say they went in at 18, 19, now they 32, 33 years old, and coming back out trying to fit in society has been a major struggle. Some of them was in there and achieved and accomplished, got their GED, kind of got some basis of what they thought would be a future for them in getting out and running into the realities is, and most of them are, and we're talking about black men, getting out and still being rejected and finding that it's a lot harder now that you've been incarcerated. And believe me, because you got your life together and you're doing some of the right things, that automatically some of these things should come into play for you, and then you find out that it's not true.
Exactly, because you did the time, you paid your debt.
Yes.
And now you're getting out and you can't even get a job.
Can't
Half
get-
the time
yeah.
there's still this stigma that, oh, you have this criminal background.
Absolutely.
You can't work for us. You can't make the type of money. You're forced to do minuscule type work for minimum wages. I can imagine some of that being just going back to that pressure, right?
And they resort to those survival techniques that they required before they went to prison.
When you say
go back to some
survival,
of that.
so like maybe if
selling drugs,
robbing, maybe substance abuse and things like that.
The thing about substance abuse with most of those guys is that they went in so early they never got off into full-fledged substance abuse. But what happens is after they go do the time and they get out and they run into these dilemmas of not being able to succeed, they resort to drugs and alcohol, and now they elevate their addiction.
Wow.
And now they have to deal with their addiction.
Right.
See, and I see a lot of that.
Exactly.
I see a lot of that.
So how, we when we think about prison, with at least the perception that they sell most on is that we're going to reform them. We're going to put them behind bars. We're going to give them, help them think differently. Is this really working? Is what I'm getting at. Is prison about reforming, or is it just about just holding someone there until they're ready to be released again?
The reforming really relies on the individual.
So those opportunities to change are
I
in
think
place.
they have to capitalize on how they reform to some degree.
Okay.
I don't think the institutions really impose. They might put some things out there for them, but
They're the right things, though. I mean, think about what we're saying here. Even just this conversation could have a major impact to shift the paradigm, to shift the thought process. Something as simple as giving someone a new or different perspective, because we understand that beliefs are shaped by what we feed our, the thoughts we feed ourselves, right? Sure. So if those aren't readily available, if people don't even know that they have a different
Well, I think to some
option?
degree, and in some institutions, they try to teach them a trade or something of that nature. But is it something that they really want to do, or something they like? Or
No,
is
we're
it
talking
just
about,
necessary?
I'm going back to the life skills comment, right, that you made earlier, just the
Sure.
mental health
Well, they have
aspects.
some counseling programs.
Or are they working?
They only offer this certain states.
Yeah,
Okay.
So who's to say whether they're working or not? I mean, it's again, you're in a position to where it's the survival of the fittest. People will do things to get them to where they're trying to go. They don't necessarily buy into it or think it's going to work. It's just something to do that's necessary.
That's
It's
just
like
having clarity
going there
on
and
some
going to chapel.
That's
right?
the black work that comes along with being a black man.
You see what I'm saying? You go to the chapel so you can have a day out of the cell. I don't know.
Yeah.
You see, I don't know. I haven't had the luxury to have that, but to have that experience. But I definitely have, friends, and I've worked within the realms of that to have some ideas of that. But I have my own perception of that because I deal with substance abuse, and I found that I've ended up having to work with a lot of those guys coming back out and then working with them with substance abuse, where basically they didn't go in with a substance abuse problem, so they think they didn't have a substance abuse problem because it didn't elevate. It only elevated after they got out. And now they're like, oh, this is an issue. But when they went in, they didn't see it as an issue. It's like somebody started off smoking weed and saying it's fun, and just having a good time, kicking it. It wasn't a problem. Most alcoholics and addicts, it only becomes a problem later on down the line.
When they
You
see
what
that
I'm
it's
saying?
impacted.
But in the beginning stages, it's just, this is what we doing.
Exactly. Exactly.
And now you get out and becomes a crutch. It becomes a device. You understand what I'm saying? And now we have a problem, you see.
Exactly.
So I see a lot of that,
Gotcha.
So, but even going back to identity, a lot of young black men went into incarceration at an early age. I worked with HIV and AIDS counseling and testing for about 4 or 5 years, and I happened to get involved in it when HIV was at its highest. And at that particular time, they came out with what they call the DL, Brothers on the Down Low.
Right, I remember that.
So I got the luxury to deal with a lot of understanding what is this down low thing.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends that's incorporated and has been incarcerated before. But as I begin to work with HIV and AIDS guys, I found out that most of our young black men, they first encounter sexually was in an institution. They go to institution, they have their first sexual encounters in prison. And as we all know, it's human nature. What you learn and what you like first, you return to. And this is what I found out in a lot of conversations that I would have. But they get out here, they don't want to be called a fag, they don't want to be called gay, but they can't deny what they like. That sexual act is what they like. So they're attracted to that, but they come out, they get with the girlfriends, they do all of these things to make them look a certain way, but they actually are still seeking that sexual gratification.
Which came when what they learned from the beginning.
From the very beginning.
And this is what you've uncovered through
through the
so
work that
do
I've
they
done.
do they feel that they
They
are
don't feel
gay?
that they're gay. They see it as a sex act.
Their preference.
But
Okay.
because people say, well, you have the special ones that say, I'm a top and not a bottom and all that other kind of stuff.
I'm a
You know what I'm
sticker
saying?
and not a taker.
But I have to take it back even a little further before I even knew anything about the guys being on the DL. I had friends who went to jail. I had some friends that went to jail and raped guys. They still didn't believe themselves to be gay.
Wow.
They seen it as a power play. It made them feel powerful.
Because to take another man.
Absolutely. It made them feel
is that
powerful.
another form of toxic masculinity then?
I guess.
Because if you're gonna rape someone,
Exactly.
that's not a good thing.
Ain't either, but
right.
I'm
But then
telling you.
but on the flip side of that, you might have some men who feel powerful, not just taking it, but the fact that they can take a man,
Sure.
not forcefully, but willingly, that gives them a high to be able to know that I
Well,
can get this man. I don't, I mean,
They say rape is more about the power of raping than the rape itself. That's what I've been.
okay.
You know, it has nothing to do with the act itself. It has something to do with how it generates the power of somebody dominating over another person or something. I haven't did a whole lot of research on any of that.
Sterling, what are your thoughts about this subject?
I only been to jail for 3 days, and that was for underage drinking. And I'm gonna be honest, I really try to just stay in my lane and stay away from anything that's gonna put me up in there, because
Sure.
it's just always just being. I got a cousin. He liked to fight. He always fighting. He ain't got out yet, and yeah, I can't imagine what it's like for the brothers that have to go through that process.
Exactly, and it's not talked about a lot. And then when you have these men who spent a lot of their life in prison and go through exactly what you explained with, this my bedfellow, and now I'm out in society, and now I have to get with the woman, right? And now think about that on the female side of that. We have to contend with men who don't know who they are, not really into you, but want to show the perception that the mistreatment, the disrespect, the breaking down of the female that is there to help,
And what exposed most of it is we start having a high rate of black women contracting HIV.
Exactly.
That's what really brought it to surface.
So that's how you are able to trace it.
Yes.
Wow, that is an interesting statistic there. One that's not talked about.
Yeah.
It should be talked about. There's a lot of things that's supposed to be talked about, but you have so many different platforms that's going on, and of course, black
it's
people
not
can't.
the hot topic.
black people can't stay on the same subject long enough to really make it a matter.
I'm not gonna say black people can't, but I think it's across the board with just in terms of just having all these different generalities, right? And trying to bring it together to really reach people that we can impact and hopefully shape some future change. With that being said, and I just want to give you both some last, some feedback. Not feedback, but give you opportunity to provide your feedback before we close things up. But any lingering thoughts, any different additional comments that you would like to make, Sterling? How about you go first?
Just the whole overall conversation of the challenges that black men faces, like I said, it'd be the reverse psychology of really having to deal with different energies that a lot of men get confused with. The verbal gymnastic, and like I said, advanced manipulation calls for a person to think that they have to abide by certain rules and regulations, but one main goal to try to have is, they say try to live a righteous life, do to others how you want others to do to you, love thy neighbor like you love thy father, so that you can be able to have that good energy come back. So, you give good energy out, you'll receive good energy back.
All right. Well, that sounds like a good piece of information that we all should have. And how about yourself? What should we individuals and society be thinking about in terms of just breaking down those stigmas that men face? What are your final thoughts on that?
Well, one of my personal objectives is to just bring the question to the table and ask the question, who are you? And what defines who you are? And I believe that it's a conversation that you need to have with yourself. I think it's a conversation that needs to carry on to others, and I think it needs to be continued, because I believe for as a healing process, because that's what we're talking about in general as human beings, I think as in a healing perspective, identity is what's most needed. I think the deception has smothered us out of freedom. And what I mean freedom of being in the bondage of denial and the bondage of negativity and the bondage of social acceptance and just those things in general. So, I like to continue the conversation and challenge people to identify who they are, to ask themselves those questions, to carry the conversation to another individual. Who are you? And I ended on this. I come to a realization I understand the difference in existing and the reality of living. I think for the most part, most people live in a world of existence. And they're not really living.
Yep.
And I'm grateful to be one of those people that are living, and I'm not just existing.
Awesome. I think that's a great way to end it. How can people, if they want to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you?
My email is jabezoutreach@yahoo.com.
And how are you spelling it? Just
JABEZ
outreach.
outreach@yahoo.com. My personal organization is named Jabez because it deals with pain. I deal with HIV and AIDS, I deal with substance abuse, and I deal with the homeless. And the prayer Jabez says, expand my territory. And that's what formulated the name Jabez.
Awesome. Thank you. And Sterling, how can folks get in touch with you?
And of course, anybody want to reach me, you can all reach me at sterlingprotherapy@gmail.com. That's Sterling, STERLING, pro, PRO, therapy, THERAPY@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you, too, for being on the show today.
Thank you.
This has been an amazing conversation, a real conversation, and one that is overdue. And I think with all the things that have been said, we can have maybe 50 more podcasts just on the specific topics that have been discussed. I would like to have you all back on the show in the future to kind of further break this down, because I really feel like this is just the beginning of really challenging the status quo on how we think. And it always goes back to how I say, you get what you think about. So let's start to challenge how we think. Who are we? Who am I? Let's ask those questions so we can now live a better life, one without oppression and one without stigma. Thank you for joining this episode, and I'll see you next time on the next Sentiment Sessions.